Oh, good. Right. Hello, everyone. My name is Rosie Foster, but was Stewart. Tom and I arrived in Sonning Common in 1962 with our baby son Jeremy, who is now 60 years, and a Labrador puppy. It was just Peter and Tommy at that time. In those early days, there was no appointment system, and surgery could go on till 10 o'clock at night. I had to keep Tommy's evening meal warm in the oven, no microwaves. He often came home for lunch, though, and otherwise took sandwiches. One of my memories was when I went into labour with my daughter in the evening and told Tommy, and he told me to hang in there because he had a late night surgery. So I sat in front of Dr. Kildare on the television, and I also I had opened a bottle of red wine, because in those days women who were pregnant, there was no problem about alcohol. So when he did come home, he took me down to the Henley hospital we were talking about earlier, and I was well relaxed. In fact, my daughter popped out, no trouble at all. And in those days, you were in the maternity hospital for a week, and it was absolute bliss to be looked after. In those early days, we were on duty. Oh, sorry, but John and Lyndsey arrived in 1965. I think that's right, isn't it? And in those early days, we were on duty over weekends in three. One weekend in three, and 2 evenings a week. This meant I had to take the phone while Tommy was out doing calls. Lyndsey and I were like what's now 111. However, we did not go into the history of the patient. We found out what the problem was, whether they needed an ambulance, and how old, and if they had someone there to be with them till the doctor arrived. Explained that it might not be straight away. We might even contact a neighbour for them. There was no mobile phones, so we had to wait until the doctor rang in to tell him about the next call. Later, in 1970, a pager was brought in, and you could page the doctor, and he would ring in. Then when the mobile phones did come in, they were like big black bricks. My husband didn't trust them at all, so I continued to be on the phone. This was particularly difficult when I started training to be a yoga teacher. This often took place at the weekends, and I would announce the next date for training, and was immediately told that was not possible as he was on duty. Usually we had a row, but then one of his colleagues would change the weekends, and so that was okay. Then my 2 eldest, when they became of age, they could help as well. Apart from being a GP, Tommy was also assistant coroner. The elder Dr. Pym was the coroner, and Joe Pym was the assistant coroner. Tommy was acting coroner for that day, and I had a phone call from Abingdon Police to say they'd found a human skull in the car park. What were they going to do with it? I said, for goodness sake, I haven't a clue. You better look after it until the coroner can ring you. Later on, we were joined up with nettle bed surgery and covered a larger area for being on duty, but then we had one weekend in 5 and 1 night a week. Memories again. Tommy was called out in a storm to visit Stoner Park, where Jackie Kennedy was staying, and had a sick child. Tommy treated the child, who was overwhelmed by the fact that Jackie Kennedy helped him on with his coat and boots. He came back all starry-eyed. Both Lyndsey and I had a big family of 4 children each, and when we were on duty, they were restricted. We could not take them out, and children came to play at our house, and friends kindly had them as well. Dog walking was difficult. We had a large Labrador which often took himself out, and we were informed that he had sired quite a few puppies in the area. On the whole, I enjoyed my time with phone duty. It was good to get to know patients, and I felt part of the community and the team. So I think it's now your turn. Oh, you've got to go up.
What time, please? Well, right, got it. Okay, right. We come from Winchester, where John had been on a pilot GP training scheme. So he was full of new ideas, as was Tom, fortunately. Peter Hempel was the long-suffering partner coping with these two youngsters. Like Rosie, who had arrived 3 years earlier, I arrived with a 2-year-old and a 2-month-old baby. In those days, wives, most were male doctors, were expected to become the answering service for their husbands out of hours when they were on call. I was at least a radiographer, so I had a little medical knowledge. As young mothers, we were seriously hampered, especially as there were no public phones, no mobile phones, and some patients had no home phones. We were on call 1 or 2 nights a week, and 1 in 5 weekends, as Rosie said, when we were where we were tied to the house. Here's one example of a hairy moment. A distraught man with no loose change was trying to get through from a public phone box, and the telephone operator was refusing to put him through to me, as I wasn't the doctor. John was out on a call, and I could hear the man pleading to be connected. Eventually we made contact, and luckily I was able to get Tom before he left for work, because it was a real emergency. Please note, 8 a.m. is a terrible time to phone, especially when I was trying to get our boys off to school. But life was far less frenetic then, and most doctors knew their patients well. One case I particularly remember was when John was on call after lunch on Saturday. An elderly lady phoned to ask if Dr. Hempel could visit her husband. I explained he wouldn't be available now until Monday morning. Well, could Dr. Stewart come? No, he couldn't come either. He wasn't available. Who did you say was on duty? There was a pause. My husband shaking his head. Oh dear, she said, I think we'll leave it until Monday, as he doesn't know your husband. I said I quite understood, but to ring again if she was worried. About half an hour later, she did ring again. Whoops. When I asked what the trouble was, she said, he can't speak or breathe. So John went, eventually, and sorted it out with happy outcomes, gladly. To some people now, this must all seem like the dark ages, but our memories and our children's memories have been happy ones.